I don't just talk about other people's stuff, I also make my own. Books in particular. To date, I have 4 books you can check out on Amazon. Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and the short story collection Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Hop on down to the description for Amazon links to all 4 books. Enjoy whichever ones you read, and enjoy the video.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni viewer, and since I've been seeing what's on Apple TV after checking out the first season of Foundation, I figured I'd see what else is on there, and again, I saw that there were 2 particular titles that I had to look at it somehow. One of them, I think some of you might have been expecting me to review if you've been following the channel for long enough. Those particular works are the feature-length animated film WOLFWALKERS and the animated short The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. And I'm doing them together because I think looking at them together is an interesting contrast. Because, well, let me give you just a little bit of backstory first as to why I was interested in WOLFWALKERS, just in case you're new to the channel and you haven't watched that far back. You see, WOLFWALKERS is produced by a studio called Cartoon Saloon, which is over in Ireland. They made their big debut called The Secret of Kells, and I only learned about it because of it was nominated for an Oscar, and I was still watching the Oscars at the time. I don't anymore. But when I saw footage from that movie, I was like, well, what's this? This is like, I've never seen anything like this before. I need to see what this movie is about. So I got my hands on a copy and I watched it, and my word, it's one of the most beautiful animated films I've ever seen in my entire life. And one of the most layered. Heck, it's not even just one of the most complex and layered animated films, it's one of the most layered and complex films I've ever seen, regardless of medium, regardless of live action or animation or what have you. It remains one of my favorite movies to this day. It is a masterpiece of animation, a masterpiece of storytelling. If you have not seen it yet, you need to. Then, of course, that was followed up with Song of the Sea, which was very different and yet no less profound. They clearly had a bit more to work with in terms of a budget. They went in a slightly different direction, but it wasn't bad. It told a story that is really, again, very beautiful. A bit more structured than Secret of Kells, which didn't necessarily have a traditional plot format. This one did have a familiar structure, but it wasn't a bad familiar structure. And what it did with that structure, I maintain to this day, it was amazing. So I reviewed those movies, and I was like, anything this studio produces, I am there. I will see it, somehow. So WOLFWALKERS is their 3rd film. And it took a while to actually make it because they really take their time with these things. Not that I complain about that. I'm taking my time with my stuff. I prefer having time to actually get it right as opposed to rushing it out. But when I saw WOLFWALKERS, like, the trailer still looked as beautiful as everything else. In fact, it looked like it had an even bigger budget than the previous films. But at the same time, when I looked at it, I had this sneaking suspicion that I knew where the story was going to go, just by watching the trailer. And I was a little worried about that because if the story was really that predictable just from the trailer, that might be a mark against it. Well, I've finally seen WOLFWALKERS, and while it's still very well made and it still looks amazing, has good performances, a lot of good things about it, I gotta say, it's not as good as what came before. And on its own, I know they can do better. Like I said, WOLFWALKERS has a lot of good stuff to recommend it. Like, the relationship between the main character, Robin, and her father, who is a hunter, I mean, it's a very wholesome relationship they have, where you can tell it's a good relationship. The father is strict, but he's caring, and everything he does is so he can stay with Robin and raise her. Robin respects him, yet she's still rebellious, and she's sort of getting to that age where she's starting to figure out that maybe not everything she's been told is as it should be, which only fuels her rebellious nature. But she's not rebellious to the point where she is like actively rebelling against her father just to spite him. One of the best interactions they have is like midway through, after Robin learns all about the Wolfwalker stuff, she realizes like she has the solution to the movie already. The conflict between the wolves of the forest and the people of the town who fear them, but are also hunting the wolves in retaliation. She knows how to resolve the conflict without any bloodshed. And she's rehearsing this conversation as she's tidying up the house, waiting for her dad to come home. And of course, her rehearsing the conversation, it goes exactly the way she would want it to. When her father actually gets home, she starts off trying to get into it and saying, "Now promise you won't be mad." And he just says, "Go on." "You didn't promise." "I know. Go on." So not only is that kind of funny, but it shows their dynamic. The father is willing to listen to his daughter, but that doesn't mean he's actually going to agree with her or approve of anything she says. Meanwhile, she knows that she can tell him about these things, but she also still realizes that maybe he's not going to approve. So there are things like that, those interactions, that make it really good. Also, the relationship between Robin and Maeve, who is the wolf girl that she befriends. Maeve is very, very different from Aisling in Secret of Kells, but not necessarily in a bad way. She just acts more like a wolf. Aisling was a spirit who just happened to take the form of a wolf. Maeve is more of like if a wolf could talk. And the bond they form is, again, very wholesome. It's kind of a sisterly bond. It goes from scared, sort of opposed as enemies, to we've suddenly become friends without realizing it. And by the end, they basically have become sisters. So there are good things in this. And the animation, the visuals, like the animation is the best it's ever looked. They clearly had the biggest budget of all the 3 films they've made so far. And visually, you see some familiar things like the contrast of circles and straight lines that was so prevalent in Secret of Kells, used again for a sort of contrast, only instead of circles representing knowledge and enlightenment and straight lines representing fear, in this case, it's round shapes representing nature and straight lines representing civilization. But even with all of those elements, the problem with it that I've got is that it feels too basic. Like the other movies, Secret of Kells and Song of the Sea, they are layered. Again, not just for kids' movies or animated movies, but for movies, they are layered. You can just keep going back to them and picking up on new things every single time and have like lengthy discussions with people about what this means or who that represents and things like that. But Wolfwalkers doesn't have that. It's far more straightforward. And being straightforward in and of itself is not necessarily bad, but in this particular case, the straightforwardness also comes with being a bit cliche. And I think this is best exemplified in the movie's villain, the Lord Protector. The Lord Protector is just... If you've ever seen a movie where the villain is a fundamentalist, professed Christian who commits all sorts of atrocities and horrible acts and justifies it by saying it's the Lord's work, that's the Lord Protector. That character, in any movie you've ever seen that archetype in, that's him. and nothing really new is brought to the table. He is so flat and underdeveloped, you would think he was an MCU villain. And the really frustrating part is that they could have done something more with him. They could have added a little bit of complexity. Like, the one time they try is a scene where he thinks he's alone and he just says a very short prayer to reaffirm that he is in fact doing the right thing, which is really just him centering his mind so he can get back to doing what he always intended to do anyway. It doesn't really count as a prayer. But that was it. Again, it only serves to fuel the cliches. Nothing new is added. I've come up with an alternative, though, if you'll stick with me for a moment. First, though, I have to say, another cool thing about this movie that I liked was Wolf Vision, where, like, when the characters are seeing through the perspective of being a wolf, the world is sort of like in constant swirling motion and black and white because, you know, the whole canines are colorblind thing, but things like scents or sounds register as color. In fact, the whole scent as color thing, I mean, that was an element I actually added to my book Occult Mafia for my werewolf character. I'm not saying they stole it. I'm not going to start a feud or anything, but you know, I also did it and I didn't take it from this movie because I didn't see it until just now. But anyway, beside the point. Wolf Vision is really interesting. It's a good visual motif for everything that happens. Now picture this. When the Lord Protector goes to do his little prayer, we dive into his mind for just a moment, and from his perspective, we see something that's like the opposite of Wolf Vision, where instead of a bunch of free-form swirling patterns and bright colors and whatnot with no outlines, this is a grid, like he's laid out the town and like everything we associate with the civilized portion of the movie. Everything is a grid, he's compartmentalized everything, and in particular, he's focusing on the three problems he's dealing with. An uprising elsewhere in Ireland, the growing unrest within the town he's overseeing, and the wolves in the forest who are exacerbating that unrest in the town. And he starts thinking, all right, these are my three issues. What am I supposed to do here? I just came back from trying to solve the uprising, and that went horribly. It's not working, and I'm not getting support from England. So I could redirect my focus here, which should be simpler in the town with the wolves and everything, but they're just not listening, and it's not working. I'm just having to imprison more people, put them in the stockades. This is just weighing down on my soul, and I'm growing tired of it all. All of this chaos, all of this unruliness. It's too much. What if I just left? Could I leave? I could get on a ship, sail off to America, cover my tracks, start a new life. No one would ever know. Leave the Irish to their fate. Who cares about them? Certainly not me. But wait, even if I did cover my tracks and nobody knew, I would still know, and I would be living with that failure forever. And I can't live with that failure. No, I have to solve this. But how? I still need the answer of how. What I need to do is I need to focus on the wolves. If I can somehow remove the threat of the wolves, that will show the people of this town that I truly am in control. I have gotten rid of the most unruly, chaotic thing on this island, and I have brought order to them. And with that, there will be a ripple effect. It will spread out, and that will demoralize the uprising. Yes, that will bring order, and I shall have brought order to Ireland. I mean, God will have brought order to Ireland through me. Yes, that's what I meant to say. Thy will be done, Lord. It's definitely not an ego trip of any sort. That would have been more interesting. It would have shown us that he feels burdened, he is incredibly arrogant, he is strictly devoted to order, and he really isn't prioritizing his faith. He's just spouting rhetoric. But, like I said, that's not in the movie. The movie just feels incredibly basic, which is a problem because I know they can do better, especially when it comes to their antagonists. Secret of Kells. Sure, you had the Vikings who were the faceless hordes that were marching in. You also had the Abbot, who, yes, he is antagonistic, but he's not a bad guy. He has good motivations. His motivations have just been engulfed by fear, basically. Or Song of the Sea, the antagonist is actually the protagonist and his journey to becoming a good brother. I know that Cartoon Saloon can do better. And it's really kind of disappointing that Wolfwalkers was kind of a step down. If it's the first of the Cartoon Saloon movies you ever see, you'll probably think it's amazing. But if it's the third, like it is for me and so many others, it might be a disappointment. Contrasting with that, however, is The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. A story that is also very simple, but it's not basic. The simplicity is actually sort of a veneer. So the story basically is just the four title characters gradually become a group as they are following a river, going in a particular direction, searching for a place called home. They're not really sure what home is, but they have a pretty good idea, and they know it's a place they all want to be, especially the boy. So, as they're going along, they just have these very quiet and simple conversations, and yet within those conversations, and when accompanied with those visuals, so much more is said than what is actually said. Okay, that sounded a bit weird, but it goes like this. Characters have conversations that generally are like one sentence apiece. One character asks a question, the other character has an answer. And those are the exchanges. That sometimes in a scene, that's the only way the exchange goes. Maybe a character might get especially bold and say 2 sentences, but it's still kept very short and concise. But that's not a bad thing. So much of what is said can be very profound. I'm sure you've seen clips, because clips from it have been going viral, basically. And there's such wisdom to be found in there. Like, for example, what is the bravest thing you ever said? Help. Asking for help is not giving up. It's actually a sign that you haven't given up. I mean, that's the sort of thing when you hear it and you're just like, huh, I never thought of it that way, but it's true. If you're asking for help with something, I mean, sure, you're admitting that you're unable to solve whatever it is you're doing by yourself, but you still want to solve it. You just know that somebody needs to come along and provide their assistance so you can solve it. That's like I said, that's not weakness. That's not a sign that you've given up. A lot of the storytelling is also conveyed through this simplicity too. Like, we don't really know where any of these characters came from. Obviously, the mole and the fox, I mean, they're out in the forest. Sure, you expect animals to be out in the forest. The horse is implied to have an origin, but we don't really know what it is. The boy also appears to have an origin. We don't know what that is either. But just through little things they say, we can infer those origins. The boy says things on and off that imply that wherever he comes from, it's a place where he was not loved or respected, or treated even with the slightest bit of decency. There are also hints based on, like, how the horse is the wisest character of the whole bunch, and how there are certain aspects of him that set him apart from everyone else that make you think maybe he's supposed to be at least a partial allegory for God. And it's all through inference. Sometimes you don't even need the dialogue. The fox, for example, At first, he appears as an opponent who wants to kill the mole because foxes are predators. They eat small animals like moles. But through an act of kindness, he no longer wishes to eat the mole. The mole actually saves the fox early on, and the fox saves the mole in return. And as the boy and the mole are traveling along, the fox is following them, but like the first half of the short, he's keeping his distance. Like, he wants to be with them, but he's not sure he'll be accepted. Even though if he could hear them talking and commenting on the fact that he's following them, he would know that he would be accepted. But even then, the dialogue is not, oh look, the fox is following us. I wonder if he is keeping his distance because he is not certain that he will be accepted by us. Well, gee, if only there was a way we could let him know that he would be accepted. Instead, like I said, the dialogue is written in such a way that it doesn't need to spell that out for you. Instead, it's written in such a way like the boy says, "Do you think the fox is following us?" And the mole says, "I certainly hope so." And that's it. You know just from that the fox would be welcome if he ever came closer. And there's a certain exchange that happens where after that, he's no longer keeping his distance. Though even towards a moment at the end, there is a moment where he's still a little uncertain. But again, it plays out so beautifully. The boy, the mole, the fox, and the horse is a perfect example of how simple is not the same as basic. Simple just means you're not overcomplicating things. You are getting straight to the heart of the matter, and, it's not flowery per se, but it's also not dragging its feet. Basic is just uninteresting. And the short is anything but uninteresting. So like I said, it's really interesting to contrast these things together because, they're both kind of similar in that they are animated works that are trying to aim for a higher caliber than what animation generally is expected to achieve. But at the same time, they go about it in such different ways that, well, one of them ultimately winds up working much better than the other, at least as far as I'm concerned. If you have Apple TV, or even if you're just going to do a trial, you need to prioritize watching The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. WOLFWALKERS, that can be a lower priority as far as I'm concerned. I don't want to give up the impression that I've suddenly given up on Cartoon Saloon. I don't know what they're going to do next, but I know that they've made 3 movies thus far. Only one of them I've been disappointed with, so I have no reason to think that all of a sudden they've gone downhill and from there they'll never be able to recover. I want them to recover. I know that they can make masterpieces. I just don't think WOLFWALKERS is a masterpiece. Their other 2 movies, brilliant. Check those out. WOLFWALKERS, whenever you want to check it out, but there's no hurry. But definitely watch The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. And read the original book. And listen to the author speak about different things, because he's actually very profound in real life as well. Anyway, that's all I really have to say at this point, but I had to say something about these things. So, if you're familiar with them at all and you want to share your thoughts, that's what the comment section is for. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off.
Congratulations, you reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, you might want to consider supporting us on Patreon. Of course, the other way to support us is to go to Amazon and check out our books: Operation Red Dragon, The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, The Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Also check the description for links to DeviantArt and other platforms we operate. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.